Hey, it's Obs, it's Mr. CHEN-KE here. Thought I'd make a video that is going to be quite short today, covering the day of the English exam and offer you some tips and tricks to make sure that the day of the exam for you goes as smoothly as possible. Before we actually talk about the English exam, though, we need to cover some general housekeeping. So, most of you guys would know by now that the Year 12 English exam is going to be held on October 24th, which is Tuesday. So the exam will begin at 9 o'clock in the morning and it finishes at 12:15 in the afternoon. So the English exam is actually 3 hours and 15 minutes. You get 3 hours of writing time, and you've got three essays to write. So all those essays are broken up into sections. So section A is your analytical or text response essay, which we will be focusing on station 11 for the exam. Section B is your comparative essay. So our comparative pairing this year was the Crucible and the Dressmaker. And section C is APA, or Argument and Persuasive Language Analysis. So the English exam is really unlike any other exam in the VCAA exam schedule. It is by far the longest exam of any subject, and it is a brutal undertaking. I'm not going to talk about this slide in too much depth, but this is sort of like a grade distribution for the English exam that VCAA release every single year. These were the 2022 results. So this is every single student in Victoria who did English mainstream as a Unit 3 and 4 subject last year in Victoria. And this is the distribution of the results across the state. You can pause the video right here on this slide if you want to have a more detailed read of it. But as you can see, the most common score last year, or the most common grade, I should say, was a B, which puts students anywhere between 33 to 36 out of 60. Now, you might be wondering, hold on, Mr. CHEN-KE, I thought the English exam was marked out of 30. 10 marks for each of the three sections. You are absolutely correct, but your exams are then double marked by a second examiner. So that's why it's out of a max 60 marks. So before we actually talk about the day of the exam, we actually have to think about the night before. And you really want to focus on setting yourself up for success. So my big tip for you is to make sure that you get all of your things ready the night before the English exam. So Monday, October 23rd, in a few weeks' time, make sure that you pack your bag. Just remember, you need a clear pencil case. Okay, this is one of the VCAA exam requirements for every subject in every exam. If you don't have a clear pencil case, that's all good. Bring a Ziploc bag if you're unsure, or bring a clear or transparent plastic pocket. Make sure you bring multiple blue and black pens. It's really important. Okay, remember you cannot write your English exam in grey lid, and it must be in either blue or black pen. So it's very, very important that you do that. Make sure you bring a water bottle. It's a 3-hour, 15-minute exam, so you're going to need to hydrate yourself. Just remember the water bottle needs to be plastic, clear, with no labels attached on it. Now, this is a big one, and I've been harping on this for the entire year when it comes to our SACs, but the same applies for the exam. Make sure you bring a dictionary. This dictionary has to be printed hard copy, and it can be English and or bilingual, okay? And last but not least, make sure that you pack your ID card the night before. So part of success on the day of the exam is actually you being organized and getting yourself ready the night before the exam. And in the top right hand corner, I have written, don't cram on Monday night. Go to bed, make sure you're well rested for the exam day ahead. The morning of the exam, make sure that you get to school early. Okay, the exam begins at 9 a.m., which means you should get to school by no later than 8:30 in the morning. Go straight to your locker bay and put all of your belongings in the locker. Do not bring any banned materials like a smartphone into the exam room. If you are caught with contraband material in Trester Hall, the VCAA invigilators will remove you from the venue, and it's very likely that you'll get a 0 for breaking exam guidelines. Make sure you think about your environment before the exam as well. Okay, a lot of students are going to be at the Year 12 locker bay nice and early on that Tuesday morning. If you need to, find a quiet space in the school an hour or 30 minutes before the exam so you can gather yourself, calm down, and calm those nerves. For example, the school library might be a good place to go. So this is the morning of the exam. When the timer starts, reading time starts now, you'll have 15 minutes. Now, it's really important to remember that the first 15 minutes of the English exam are reading time only. You cannot pick up a pen, okay? What you read first in the exam is very much up to you, but my recommendation is you spend about 2/3 of your reading time, so about 8 to 10 minutes, reading the text that you'll be asked to analyze for Section C, that's APA. Okay, now there's no downtime during reading time. You read over and over until it is time to start writing. So in terms of Section C, there's no sort of formula, but I would recommend, if you can, read Section C 3 times. The first time you read the text or texts for Section C, you want to carefully read the background information box. And here you're really focusing on understanding the context and the audience of the text. And from there, you just want to read the texts, whether it's an article, a podcast transcript, a newsletter, whatever you're given, you simply just want to read it and you want to try to understand what the text is about and who or what the author's contention is. The second time you read the Section C texts, what you want to do is you actually want to read and you want to focus on trying to pick up on how the argument develops. Notice this task is called analyzing argument and language. So you need to actually be conscious of how an argument develops. So you want to be looking at the types of arguments that are offered or outlined in the text. Are the arguments more so, health-related arguments? Let's say you get an issue about vaping, the text might have arguments that are more related to the health dimensions of the issue. It might be about the economic issues, the social issues. So what kind of arguments and what kind of dimensions of these arguments are being conveyed through the text? You also want to be thinking about how the argument builds and how the arguments are sequenced by the author. Okay? And you also want to think about argument shifts and, by extension, tonal shifts. When and where what does the argument change and why does it change or shift at that particular moment? Does the emotion behind the argument change as well, and why? If you get to read the text the third time, fantastic. You should be reading for language choices. So these are the techniques, the devices, the language choices that the author is making to craft their argument using the most in the most persuasive way possible. If you don't get to a third reading, that's okay. Try to identify some language choices during your second reading. Okay? Writing time, the basics, okay? There's no sort of formula, again, for how to approach writing time, but you've got 3 hours. Now, logically, you should begin with Section C, given you've just read the text that you have to analyze and write on for Section C. Then you want to move on to Section A, which is the Station 11 text response essay, or Section B, the comparative essay. It's up to you which one you go with. I would suggest the second essay that you write should be the one that you're most confident with. You want to make sure you stick to time as best that you can. No more than 1 hour per essay. Now, you've got to really start planning and practicing for the writing time. 3 hours to write 3 essays is a really, really brutal undertaking. So you need to start thinking about how you can set yourself up best for the first hour of the exam and then the second hour mark of the exam. So that's the reason why I've been telling you to do as many mock and trial exams as possible. Okay? Now, another thing that I think about as you're planning for writing time, planning for those 3 hours, is you want to think about what piece you feel most comfortable finishing with. Okay? So you obviously start with Section C, but in terms of the Station 11 essay and the comparative essay, which one are you most comfortable finishing with? Yeah? Preparation is key. You need to start thinking about being strategic. Which piece do you write the quickest? Okay? Let's say you feel like Section A, your Station 11 essay, that's the essay that you can write in the least amount of time, aka the quickest essay that you can write. If that is your go, then in terms of the 3 hours writing time, you logically should go CBA. Start with Section C. At the 1 hour mark, you should then transition and begin writing your comparative essay, Section B. And then you want to finish off with the essay that you can smash out because you're quickest and most confident with it, which would then be Section A, your Station 11 essay. So CBA might be the way to go. Okay? But again, there's no magical formula. You need to think about this and be strategic. Okay? On the other hand, you also want to think about, is there a section that requires a little more time for me to write? For me personally, I'd say that probably would be Section B, the comparative essay. It's probably the hardest essay to write in terms of time. So if that's the case, then you might want to go CBA, like I've just said. Okay? So, in the next video, guys, I'm going to talk a little bit about swapback. So what you can do in that week leading up to the exam, so that time between the end of classes and the exam, to make sure you're being as productive as possible. But otherwise, hope this video has been helpful, and I hope and wish you the best of luck for the end of year English exam. Thanks, guys.